Hey, Christine, to round out the conversation, I want to ask you about kind of some themes that you have talked about and written about consistently. And I remember even having an episode where we talked with the governor's education advisor. And I think it's helpful to kind of recenter or reground all of us, especially when we're going into a legislative session, in what are the core principles that we ought to be advancing when we have these kinds of debates. For example, you've written a lot about the role of parents directing the education of their kids. You've done some studies on open enrollment as a component of that. So maybe start there. Just when you think of parents sort of being the chief decision makers when it comes to how their kids are educated, what do we need to keep in mind as a state, and especially for our legislators as they're having these debates with respect to that key principle?
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, we already have a statute that really clearly outlines the fact that parents are have the primary responsibility for educating their kids, and that the state has a secondary responsibility. And so it's through that lens that we should really be looking at all of these different policies. And um, so when we're talking about open enrollment, for example, in any issue, really, I think something that is so important is transparency, right? We want to see how something is working, what the numbers are, what the trends are, and then making sure that that transparency is really usable and understandable, not just for policymakers, but certainly for them, but also for parents. We want the parents to be able to be consumers themselves, where they can look at the data and make good decisions for themselves. So with open enrollment, we just know that there's a lack of transparency there. There's just a lack of information. And so we'd like to see the state have a reporting requirement and then other things as well. So there is a requirement that parents have to get notified from a district if their student was accepted or not accepted, if they apply for open enrollment. But there's no requirement to explain why they were denied in the event that they were denied. And so we think a really great way of just bringing parents in is to explain, give a reason why they were denied. Maybe it's something they can cure in the future, maybe it's not. But that is also another piece of transparency. Something else that I think about often and communicate with different ed leaders as well is there's the requirement, which is the bare minimum, and then there's the ideal, which you can use creativity or innovation to kind of reach for. So right now there is a lack of people meeting the requirements of sharing some of this data, and then there are some um, districts or schools or leaders that not only meet it, but pursue it in a way that makes it really parent friendly, and it's clear that they're inviting parents in. So we like to highlight those as well. But another thing, I think this comes up with the private education choice discussion as well, is this issue of accountability, and this is so important. Accountability can be looked at in different ways. Financial accountability, and always we want to respect the taxpayers who are funding education, public education, and then accountability to parents who are the ones that are sending in their students to these different teachers or programs and saying, "Are you happy with this? Are you happy with the outcomes? And if not, move your kids elsewhere." And that's why choice of all types are so important to have them working well. Because if you want true accountability to parents, you need to give them choices and options to move if it's not working for them. Um, so I think these things should really just kind of color how we look at a lot of different policy areas.
Christina, as we begin to wrap up here, I want to ask you if the legislature came to you and said, "All right, Christine, we've got all these education bills slated for debate this session. What should we pass? What should we kill? What should we defer?" Do you have any gut sense of recommendations for the legislature to say these are good bills, pass these are bad bills, don't pass these? And as some of them, if it kind of depends and you have to see how the debate shakes out, then that's fair as well. But just anything top of mind that you would say, legislature, please do this session on education policy.
Yeah. Um, I would start with protect parental rights, promote parental responsibilities wherever possible, increase funds for the education choice programs, increase transparency for any of the public school programs. Um, I think prioritizing literacy would be huge, making sure that's a top priority. And, this is a legacy issue for Sutherland, but it's also something that we see bills going public for civics education. And any time that we can support civics education and making sure that students are equipped to be participants in their government, full support of that. And so we see some movement in that area, including a bill actually that is really interesting that focuses on real world responsibilities and duties once you reach the age of majority, including, voting rights and registration, jury duty obligations, credit and debt, including student loans. I mean, those are just so important. And I personally felt that my education didn't prepare me for a lot of those things. So things like that were really valuable. But in general, I just think to look at it through this lens of how can we help parents make the best choice for their student in terms of education.
Christy, I'm reminded of amusing memes that I've seen on social media over the years of, folks saying that, well, I did, in high school, I didn't learn how to file my taxes or do these other kind of adult life skills that you're talking about, but I had to learn algebra, and my teacher always said, you're not always going to have a calculator with you, so you need to learn this. And they say, well, we have smartphones now, so we do have a calculator, but I still don't know how to do these other things in kind of adult life. And they're funny and amusing to that extent, but I think to your point, it's education that can further and better equip young people to be healthy, contributing, civically engaged members of society can make some good sense. So it's exciting to hear that kind of stuff progressing. In the couple of minutes we have left, is there anything we're missing? Anything else on your mind that ought to be on the radar of our audience, of our policymakers, of our parents here in the state as we go into this legislative session on education policy?
Sure. Funding is always an issue every year. There is a bill that is proposing to reduce the income tax rate a little bit. And obviously, that's a nuance for Utah because the revenue from income tax goes directly to education. And so that's something that people want to just be aware of. I don't know its likelihood for passage, but I don't know. Um, but always, there's this idea that Utah is spending way less, usually at the very bottom of of the states on per pupil funding, but a lot of people also show that we get great outcomes for for that, so we have a really high return on investment. So just keep an ear open for that debate about funding. As always, I kind of look at it through it's not just how much, but what are the outcomes? How are we spending it and what are we getting for that? So, I think that would just be another piece to pay attention to.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.